Welcome to the podcast, Jessica Slice. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
In this season of the podcast, I'm focusing on the ways that parents are taking these broad principles like radical
Mhm.
acceptance and low demand and attunement and making it work for them and for their unique kids. Because the more popular this method gets, the more I see people using it as a litmus test or judging other people for not doing it right, or
Mm,
using black and white thinking of you got to be all in or you're not doing it, and all of that kind of absolutism. It just doesn't really work for families like
mhm,
ours. And as I asked you to come on, you were like, we do low demand, but we don't. And I love that.
mhm.
That is exactly the conversation I want to have with you.
Yeah.
So, can you share with me a little bit about your parenting journey? What it's been like to practice this kind of parenting while disabled and some of those kind of do and don't trade-offs that you make on the regular.
Yeah. I have learned so much from low demand parenting from you. And then in the city we lived in before Toronto, where we are now, I was in a homeschool community. And I would say it was like a explicitly low demand crew. And we have a daughter who's now 8, and she's autistic. And we knew that pretty early. And it was clear that the methods that I was learning, both more like authoritative and then gentle parenting, didn't really work for her. This idea, like, I know you're sad, but this is the way it is. That kind of talking to her would just absolutely enrage her. It was like I was like tormenting her if I tried to talk to her the way Dr. Becky would tell me to. And then when she started kindergarten, she started with JK, or I can't remember, pre-K. In Canada, it's called JK. And I'd say that was the first time we really considered that maybe our style of parenting needed to be different. So I
Mm.
think unlike some autistic kids, she didn't have behavioral issues at school. Her teachers really loved her and loved having her in the classroom, but she felt really bad about herself at school. Like, it was a
Mm.
place that made her very unhappy, and the focus on sitting at a desk and doing worksheets. And I remember there was a parent teacher conference where I kept asking, is she making friends? Does she seem happy? How does she seem in the classroom? And they kept saying that she was writing the letter E backwards. And I was like, I just could not care less about that. That is so irrelevant to me. And they kept sending worksheets for her to practice writing her letters the correct way. And I was like, do you really care? Why are we talking about this? And I noticed the other parents seemed to also care that their kids were writing letters the right way. And anyway, by the end of her next year, we had taken her out of school and switched to homeschooling and forest school. And it was during that time that we started to try to adjust our parenting to make it so she was having fewer meltdowns or times of like intense distress on a daily basis. And our first approach to that, at this point, she's 5, going on 6, was like extreme low demand. So, as much
Mm.
screen time as she wants, she's setting a schedule, she's picking what shows. We had some rules about shows. We don't do guns and stuff, but really a kind of wide open, as long as she was safe rule. Not as many rules around food, sugar content. What we found in that is that she started to become less and less happy. She started to become more anxious. She started having more meltdowns. And we were like, this is probably like a detox. This is probably her getting used to the freedom. And that's what friends said. But that wasn't the case. What was the case is having a lot of freedom to her and makes her extremely anxious, that she drowns in choices, that the paradox of choice very strongly applies to her. And so now she's, like I said, she's 8. And where we are now, which is not at this moment working well, is that she has a ton of rules about certain things and then tremendous freedom when it comes to education when it comes to like these kind of bigger decisions. We would never force her into a traditional school setting where she wasn't happy. She eats the same exact food for breakfast, lunch, dinner every single day, no matter what, in the exact same way. And we would never, ever try to change that. She has like this real freedom to pick what she eats. But we also have a lot of rules about sugar because when she has a choice around sugar, she panics and eats too much and feels
Mm.
sick and regrets it and gets sad and gets mad at herself. I've just been really excited for this conversation because I'd love to hear how that kind of fits into your experience, how you think about things, and also happy to give like examples of some of our pretty rigid rules in our house.
Yes, so that's where I wanted to go next. And yeah, to put it, how do I think about that reality? It brings me back to how I define a demand, that a demand is what is too hard for this person in this circumstance. And so
Mm-hmm.
it really does our kids a disservice to say limiting their food choices is a demand. And then we try to blanket that over all kids.
Mm-hmm.
When no, for her, being in the having to choose against sugar or having to moderate her own sugar intake is a demand. And so the lower demand approach is to have, and what I think is interesting and what I want to hear you talk about is that the rules are probably less important than the structural ways that you live it out. If
Yep.
you just had sugar around all the time, but then you were telling her, oh no, you can't have that, you can't have that, that would
Mm-hmm.
be like super high demand. But instead, I'm
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
guessing that, and I'd love for you to hear about how you actually change the scenario so that she's not being asked something, you aren't asking something of her that's too hard.
No.
So
So the
that's
way
what I
meals,
think is
yeah.
the key. That's like magic of low demand is when we change
Yeah.
the structure so that we're not asking the too hard thing day after day. So tell me how you've done that because it sounds like you really have, and I see your wheels turning.
Yeah. So I hadn't thought of it through that lens, and that's exactly right. So I'll give the example of TV. We have a TV in her, what we call the Dugga room. And Dugga is a word we made up for any sensory thing that feels good for her autism, which is what she says. So we
Give
have
me,
one
how
of
do you use
those.
Dugga in a sentence? It's like, that was
Is
Dugga
this
awesome.
is this Dugga? This seems like a real Dugga thing. Or
Mm.
do you need a Dugga? I guess we use it as an adjective and a noun. But in her Dugga room, we have one of those swings. It's like a stretchy material hanging from the middle of the room that she spins on. And then she has a climbing wall and a nugget and her art supplies and a train set and the TV. And it's where she goes to regroup. And then next to the TV, we have a timer and a list of rules for the TV. And these are rules that are entirely based on her needs. It's not because we have decided this is the virtuous way to watch TV. And the first rule is she has 5 minutes to pick a show. She has to set a timer, pick a show within 5 minutes. If
Mm.
she has longer than 5 minutes, she is brought to tears by the decision pressure. But if she has
Mhm.
5 minutes, she's good. We have found that's like the magic time. And what we've also noticed is if she picks a show faster, she'll set the timer and still make it go off because she enjoys the timer going off after she's picked her show. So sometimes we hear her go downstairs, turn on the TV, and then 10 seconds later, a timer goes off. We're like, okay. And then she can watch a show for an hour. And then after that hour, she can keep watching TV, but she has to create something, either a train set or art. Because if she watches TV without limits, she gets starts to again get really anxious, and then the pressure to know when to stop feels like too much for her. And so we've said you can watch TV for as long as you want, but we need to see something you've created in
Mm.
any way. So she does paints or clay or art. And again, it feels so not the parent I imagine myself to be, is like, show me what you've accomplished while you watch TV, but it has made her so much happier to watch TV in like within this container. And then the other rule is she can't watch Prime, Amazon Prime, because you can't erase the option to buy things on Amazon Prime. And the
Mm.
temptation to buy things is too upsetting for her to see all the things we do not own. So she can only watch platforms where there's not an option to buy anything. And there's that list of rules, and she sticks to it, and she is like very happy with her rules. When people come over, she shows them the TV rules and they feel like her special little TV container.
Mm. So when mainstream parents think about boundaries, it's very much what parents do to children based on their parental idea of what thriving looks like. How do you think about these rules? How do they interrupt that dynamic of this is how you should be, and thus I will make it so?
I guess we haven't thought at all about how she should be, other than we want her distress level lower. And so it's what are the things that decrease her level of suffering? And I
Mm.
think that's the motivation behind every rule we make is how does she suffer and what can we do to prevent that and give her freedom within that suffering prevention. But I think it required us starting with 0 of, like, endless screen time, any food you want, and then figuring out, okay, now what are the things that hurt her, instead of before we started at that point, she was going, like I said, to a traditional school. She wore a uniform. She did worksheets after school. We were very much just doing whatever we thought was the normal to do. And so it took erasing all that and then saying, okay, what are our edges or what works for the dynamic of this family?
Yeah, it's so different. I was thinking about that with how different my son and daughter are in terms of what
Mhm.
makes them feel safe. That my I have two sons, but one of them really struggles with any competition, even being in the presence of competition
Mm.
or being
Mhm.
with a person who is competitive with themselves. He
Mm.
doesn't have to be involved for it to be really
Yeah.
distressing. And so we've made a competition free home in order to accommodate that. But we've found lately that my daughter really thrives on a good race. She's
Mhm.
much more likely to take her supplements if I'm like, I bet you can't do it before I get back with your water refill.
Mhm.
Her eyes light up and her
Mhm.
energy skyrockets and she nails it and is so proud of herself. And so it really is, it's humbling in a way to realize just because I've got it mastered for one kid, it doesn't mean it applies to the other one. And that this parenting isn't a one size fits all, even within two kids who share all the same diagnoses. Like they technically have
Mhm.
the exact same neurotype and they couldn't be
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
different in what they need in order to thrive. And that really
Right.
challenges parenting, mainstream parenting culture, which says we have family rules. Like we don't hit in this house. It's very
Mm. Mhm.
absolute, very blanketed,
Mhm.
universal. What we're talking
Yeah.
about is so customized. And it makes me think, I wonder if you could connect the dots for me about the way that you have found your own thriving within the disability community and with
Right.
an understanding of how ableism creates the shoulds for us. It creates these universal
Right.
supposed tos. I wonder how
Well,
those two conversations link up in your brain.
I think that is the foundation of why this our version of low demand parenting works for Kay, is that we talk about disability so openly in our house. I'm a wheelchair user. My disability is a big part of our family's life. My physical needs are a big part of conversation. And so when we say to her, and we say it like this, I don't know if it's right, but we say, your autism makes it hard for you to know when you're done picking a show. And so we're going to have this rule that you have to set a timer. And because our family is stigma free with disability, that I'll say my disability makes it hard for me to lift the baby, or my disability makes it hard for me to stand up, or impossible. That when I say that, there's so little judgment in our house around disability. I know there is when she goes out into the world, but I think that makes it all much more tolerable because we're
Mhm.
all operating with our own limitations that we speak about openly. The other day, so my husband's autistic too, we got a package that had something that needed to be put together, and she called for me to help them. And she said, "These autistic hands," and she held up her hands and pointed to David and said, "They're not going to put this together." And I was like, "Yeah, you're probably right. They're not. They're not."
Oh my gosh, these autistic hands. I couldn't love that more.
But I love it because she's not embarrassed. No, and my body, like, can't do many things, and so I think the disability taught me, or is always in the process of teaching me, to be okay with my own limitations, and that the standard for what it is to be a good worker or a mom or just person, what it is to have an interesting life, what it is to have a big life, all of those things. Like, I'm constantly reevaluating and changing that. And I think it impacts how my, how Kay certainly, but I'm sure my baby eventually will view their own, like their own ability to be flexible with how to judge their lives.
Mm. How much do you think that shame is a part of boundary setting for most families? Like you're articulating that you're taking the shame element out and able to state, like, hey, this is hard for you. No, I do not judge that it is hard. I do not think you should be anything other than who you are. This is
Hmm.
hard. And so here's the rule to protect you. Here's the rule to keep you thriving. And then that rule to her feels life-giving. It's something she's proud of,
Hmm.
something that she heartily embraces. It's making me wonder how much
Mm.
shame clouds that whole process and makes it so much more difficult to be in that kind of life-giving relationship to rules or boundaries or limits. Or I know those are all, there's nuance to
Right.
each of those words and we could get into
Right.
that, but the presence of an external regulator, whatever that is, like her rule list, the fact that there's no
Yeah.
shame in the rule list, how important do you think that
Oh
is in
my
the
God, that must
process?
be most of it, right? I think so much of parenting is this sense that there's a external, like this crowd watching externally, and are you doing things in the right way? Or is your kid good enough? Will they be okay when they enter the world? How close to what is normal are they? And how can you get them closer and closer to that? And I think disability is or can be an opportunity to reject the entire framework of normal. And then, so if you can build rules from within that, they feel totally different. I think you're right, because we never say things like, "This is hard for," I know you weren't implying that. We don't say, "This is hard for you, but that's okay." But there's just this, of course we don't say that, because why would it not be okay? The whole family can't do different things. The baby can do almost nothing. And when well, I can do very little. Yeah, it's just, we're just our own unwieldy organism that we have different things in place to protect all of us. Currently at night, right before bed, she gets under the covers in my bed with me, and we set a timer for 5 minutes, another timer, and we look at baby videos of her.
Mm.
And at 5 minutes, David comes in and she can show him one video that we all watch together. And then she hops out of bed and goes to her room, and that all started because we were watching them together, and then she wept when we had to stop it the first night.
Mm.
And I said, "Okay, it's too hard for you to stop it, but I don't wanna stop watching videos. What can we do?" And she said, "I need to know how long we're gonna watch it." And I said,
Mm.
"Okay, we're gonna do 5 minutes a night." And then every night she sprints in here and says, "Is it time for 5 minutes?" And
Mm.
I don't know. I think if I had the sense that she should be able to stop watching baby videos, like if I go back to that and I felt
Yeah.
embarrassed that my 8-year-old loses it if she can't continue watching baby videos, then the sense that she would get from me is, "You have failed and now we have to do this." But I
Mm.
think the sense that she must be getting is, "Okay, how can I make this not hurt?"
Yeah. It's that relief of suffering.
Mm.
That's often tell parents when you're dropping the right demand, our kids' first emotion is relief. And it can be really intense. There can be a kid who pretty much never wants to hug or say, I love you. When you
Mhm.
let go of that one thing that's been causing them
Mhm.
so much stress, sometimes they'll spontaneously burst into tears or
Mm.
jump
Mm.
into your lap and say, thank you, I love you. It's it helps me appreciate that we really are sometimes in low demand, we become so on equal partners with our kids that we forget that
Mm.
we are the parent,
Mm.
holds so much power, that we know
Mhm.
so much more than they do about some of these bigger picture life arcs that they just don't know
Mhm.
yet. For them,
Right.
this expectation is the whole world. And when you let
Mhm.
it go, they're so overwhelmed with relief. That's what I'm imagining for her when you're like, okay, we set a timer for 5 minutes. It's like she's so relieved that she doesn't
Right.
have to like find the ability inside to stop without distress.
And I think my earlier perception was that low demand would be I let us watch videos until she acknowledges it's time for her bedtime, which even if I went that route, it would that would not feel good to her knowing her. She would
Mm-hmm.
be getting more and more anxious, like, "When is this gonna end? I don't know, I don't know. Is it up to me? Am I tired? Am I not tired? Am I super tired?" And I just know her. I know that that option will not work.
What do you wish that other parents, especially parents who might not share your exact circumstances, who haven't
Mhm.
done the work of de-shaming needs or embracing disability, what do you wish that they could learn from what you're sharing today about interdependence, flexibility, redefining what it means to do enough? What I know I'm taking all of your work in Unfit Parent and bringing it in here at the end, but I really feel
Yeah.
like the way that you're contextualizing, even within low demand, is
Mhm.
such a beautiful example of this bigger contribution that you're trying to make to the parenting community. I don't know. Can I tee you up to share like what is it that enabled you even within this subset, this like pretty radical
Mhm.
subset of parenting to be like, we're going to even do this our own way and we're going to be like bad at low demand, even if
Yeah, my shame when my low demand friends come over and the house is covered with, like, rules written everywhere. Eat 2 carrots before a popsicle. It's what kind of operation are you running here? I think what being a disabled parent has taught me is that performing parenthood or performing perfection for anyone is like a losing battle, that you'll never get there. There is no there, but that the times I have felt most like solid in my body and solid in my life is when I've told the truth and expected less from myself. And there's this Mary Oliver poem that I keep thinking about lately, and I think it applies here, but she has this one stanza where she says, "There are many ways to flourish or to perish. How old pain can stall you at the threshold of function, a golden bowl or a basement without hope." And I just think we bring so much pain into our parenting and so much trauma and into our partnerships and into our lives. And being disabled reminds me constantly that there are many ways to flourish in this life. And one version of flourishing, I believe, is the life my family is living right now, which is a pretty tiny life with a lot of needs and a lot of specific rules and a decent amount of suffering and very few adventures. And I think it's like it is a life that from the outside might look hard, but in so many ways I do feel like we're flourishing, and I just think there are many ways to flourish.
Mm. Thank you for sharing your disobedient low demand. I feel more spacious having this conversation with you, and it's really helped to point out the ways that each family will do this really differently, and that's needed. The
Mm.
fact that you've felt judged by your low demand friends, which I'm sure you mean that somewhat playfully, but also somewhat
Yeah, of
truthfully.
course. Yeah.
It's a joke, but also in a way it's very real. Like any community, any subculture can begin to police its boundaries and to say only certain people belong here. If you perform it right. And
Mhm.
I love this opportunity to debunk that and say
Yeah.
what's too hard for one kid might be easy peasy for another. What's too
Mhm.
hard for one parent is going to be unnoticeable for another. And so, by nature, our very best demand drops and our flourishing life is going to be
Mhm.
just as customized as our specific bodies, our specific
Mhm.
brains, our specific relationships. And no one can look from the outside based on what we're doing and determine whether
Mhm.
it's low demand or not. That has everything to do with how it feels to the people performing it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. I'm so glad we had this conversation because I've had this sort of embarrassment about it. But I think you're absolutely right. Like low demand is what it for some kids, the demand is making the choice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the open ended, unexpected. And for
Mm.
your daughter, house covered in rules is the safest house for her.
Yeah.
How beautiful is that? Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah. Thanks.